Hi, I'm Jessica. Thanks for signing up for the Virtual Soldering Skills Workshop. In this brief video, I'll just talk about how to set up a station at home so that when we meet online, we'll be ready to work. My first soldering station was here in my bedroom. What I did was I cleaned up as I went along. I also had my window open and a side door open for ventilation, and I also had a fire extinguisher handy. Now that the weather is better outside, I've moved all my soldering and basically all my jewelry making outside into the side yard, which I will show you now. Okay, this is my jewelry making area. I have a shed behind me, and that's where I keep a lot of my tools. And then right here are two benches. I have a table right there, and that's where I'll be showing you how to solder. And then I have right there a sawing station. And up here is where I have my pickle set up, which we'll need to clean our metal after it's been soldered. So I just use a small crock pot. This one was literally $5 from Goodwill. And it's nice and warm. And I have it in a big dish here, so if anything spills, it'll stay in the glass dish. And I use copper tongs. You always want to use copper tongs. And then I just use a formulated pickle, which is a mild citric acid. When I'm done pickling my jewelry, I will neutralize it in baking soda and water. Just plain store-bought baking soda. And I'm just using distilled water, but you could use any kind of water. Okay, so the first thing that we want to definitely be aware of is fire safety. So I do have a fire extinguisher up here, and I always make sure that it's in the green in case there was an accident. So we want to set up a fireproof surface. My fireproof surface is probably overkill, but it's what I like to do. First of all, this isn't fireproof, but it's just ease. If you can find one of these rotating boards, it'll help so much with your soldering. The next thing is I have a cast iron pan. I just found this out in the street, and I use this as my fireproof surface. So with this turning wheel, Lazy Daisy, I can actually work on different soldering projects pretty easily. Okay, two other things that I use a solder board, and then I tend to use a charcoal block. It reflects heat, and it also holds heat in. I like it. I think you can get away with just using your solder board and put it on a fireproof surface, which could also be, besides like a cast iron pan, you could just use a tile. Okay. Sometimes I use this honeycomb style board to solder on because I could stick pins in it and help adjust things and hold things. The torch I'll be using is a handheld propane or butane torch, butane. And here's the fuel. I do have a more significant setup as well with oxygen and propane, but we don't need to use that for a project like this. You're going to need 16 gauge silver wire. This is half hard and round. You'll need some sort of snips to be able to cut the wire. You're going to need a ruler to measure the wire. You will need a ring mandrel or a bracelet mandrel. Both of these are steel, so they can be hammered upon. If you don't have a mandrel, you could use something else that is round and has hold on. Yes, you could go play video games. Something that's hard that you can sort of like hammer on like a baseball bat. You are going to need flux. Flux is a paste. This kind of flux, it's pretty dry in here, so I would add water in here, just a little bit of water, and I would use a small paintbrush to stir it up so that it's kind of like the consistency of pancake batter. And you would paint the flux on where the ring is joined together, or where it's going to be joined together. It helps the solder to flow. There's another form of flux that I like very much. This is Prips, and I can just spray it on rather than having to deal with a paintbrush. So I like Prips a lot. You're going to need solder. Solder comes in different, silver solder comes in different grades. There's extra hard, there's hard, medium, easy, and extra easy. And hard basically melts at 1,450 degrees Fahrenheit or 788 degrees Celsius. Hard is makes I don't know if bond is the right word, but it's definitely a stronger bond because when you solder, you're basically melting the metal, so it's changing the crystalline structure, and the solder becomes part of the silver. So it's like the molecular structures together. So when you do hard solder, it's just the strongest bond. But what I'm going to recommend for this project is medium solder, which is fine. And solder comes in sheets, wire, or paste. Here's what a little snippet of a sheet looks like, and I keep it in a tin. Then I have hard solder, and I have a mix of wire in here, and I have some sheets. You can also write the word hard on your sheet solder so that you don't, or your medium solder or whatever it is, so you don't forget. And then I have an easy solder tin. So I store it in tins. When it's time to use my solder, I would use a tool called a scraper. It's got 3 sharp sides, and I would take a little bit of the sheet and I would scrape it on the top, flip it over, scrape it on the other side. Not on my palm, but on a work table. Or I could put it in the pickle to clean it off. And I would use snips to create pallions, which are basically 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter squares of solder that are ready to use. So I'd clean the solder off and then snip it into pallions. The third type of solder, besides wire and sheet, is paste solder. Some people prefer it because it has flux already in it. I believe this one does. But what I don't like about it is that it contains fluorides. The fumes are really bad for you. I don't use it very much. Okay. The next thing you're going to need is interlocking tweezers. These are interlocking tweezers to hold your pieces in place, and this is called a third hand. So I can have it set up next to my solder board, and I can position this. It can hold a ring or some piece of metal in place, and I can solder. It does draw some of the heat away from the piece, so just be aware that if you use one of these while you're soldering, it will draw some of the heat away. Here's another third hand, but I actually haven't used this for soldering, and I don't know if I would. You're going to need some solder picks. These are titanium solder picks, and they're all pretty mangled. But you'll need them to push hot things around or to dip in flux and then dip onto one of your solder palliums to move it. So usually I have a couple of picks handy. You don't need a tripod for this project, but this is what a tripod looks like, and a screen, and it's another useful tool for soldering when you need to put flame underneath and then on top. Okay. Safety glasses. Safety glasses are just one of those tools that are useful to have. It's better to be safe than sorry. I'm not going to be using them because I'm going to just use my regular glasses as safety glasses, but it's good to have these if you are going to continue making jewelry, have a pair on hand. An apron. I will use an apron when I'm soldering. For cleaning up, we're going to need files, and this is more files than you're going to need, okay? These are needle files and hand files. Okay, and then a bench block, and here's a pad that goes underneath it for making sure that our bracelet or our ring is on a flat plane and for hammering on. And then you should have a rawhide mallet or a rubber mallet and something like a ball peen hammer that has a flat face. Okay, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.